think that they look a bit like their father? Hands up. Quite a lot of you. You see, it's something that we're really trained to say. When you get a baby, you'll very rarely get somebody say, oh, he really looks like his mother. You'll hear them say, he looks like his father. We have expressions like the apple never falls very far from a tree, like father, like son. You see, in the past, it was very difficult to prove that somebody was really your father. It's very difficult for a woman to fake a pregnancy for 9 months, but it's quite easy for her to pretend that, well, the husband is the father when in fact he isn't. Well, for my case, there's no doubt whatsoever. I look exactly like my father. And that's not the only thing that I've got from him. I've inherited, care with money. I kind of have a generally even kind of temper. And I also have a great interest in history and in finding out about what happened in the past. But I'm also a lot like my mother. If you ever get me really angry, you'll see what my mother's temper is like. And what's more, I've also got a real interest in foreign cultures and in different kinds of languages and all this kind of thing. So there are really very much two sides to me. Now, just as in the past, you couldn't really establish paternity with any great certainty, today you can, and I'll show you why. It's down to these things. This here is your X and your Y chromosome. And we all have them inside of us, and if you decode them properly, then you can say with pretty much 100% certainty that you get your X chromosome from your mother and your Y chromosome from your father. Now, obviously, in my case, that's not very interesting, but there's a lot of things in here that it can tell you about us as well. Because what the emerging science of genetics is beginning to teach us is how many of the things that are on here can tell you a lot more about yourself. They can tell you what kind of group you belong to. They can tell you at what point your particular part of the human tree branched off. And that can give you some really interesting information. Why am I talking about this? Because last year for my birthday, I got a rather unusual present, a DNA testing kit. So whereas most people would be opening presents on their birthday, I got a brush and was removing cells from the inside of my mouth, which I sent off to Canada. And for all of this wonderful present, I had to wait weeks just to get a few letters and numbers. And when I first got them, I wondered what I was bothering about. But after a while, and when I did the research, I found it was absolutely fascinating, both on my father's and on my mother's side. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about that tonight, and how it's really changed the way that I look at myself as a human being. Now, going into this, what did I think? I thought that I'd find out that my father was a pure Saxon, and he'd always told me that my nose and my chin gave that away. And I thought that on my mother's side there might be something a bit more interesting. They're less kind of rigorous historically. There's lots of stories about, gypsies and Norman princes and all the rest of it. So I thought there might be something interesting there, but I had no idea what was going to happen. Let's start with my father. And this is what came out. R1b. I'm not going to bother talking about haplogroups and subclades and things like that. That's boring. What does this actually tell me about myself? Well, the R1b group of people turns out to have been some people who were really from the Basque region. That's where this particular subclade arose. During the last ice age, 10 to 15,000 years ago, most of northern Europe was covered by ice, and humans had to retreat further south to safer places. One such place was the north of Spain, the area we now call the Basque region. And this part of the world was somewhere where there were people who were sheltering. As the ice began to recede, these people headed north. They're so-called Atlantic travellers. So they headed up the coast through France. There was no British Channel, the English Channel at that point, because the sea levels were so low that there was no British Isles. It was just part of the continent. So they travelled across, and in time, well, it became an island, and they stayed there. I find this absolutely amazing, because what this means is that I'm part of the original British population. Not Saxon, not Celtic, but pre-Celtic. My family has been there since the very beginning of the British Isles. They have seen every single thing in history. I'm fascinated by linguistics. So they must have gone from speaking a language like Basque to speaking a Celtic tongue to then speaking a Germanic tongue. That's amazing. When I was asked recently on a form, you know, on what basis do you claim British nationality, I wrote R1B. But what of my mother's side? This is what I got back. H11A. And this is really the end of it. Because basically H means Europe, and the higher the number gets, the more recent it is. This is quite a recent one, and there's very little known about it. All they could tell me was roughly where these groups are found. There are some of them in Lebanon, Turkey. There are others of them in the Caucasus, but the big concentration is Slovakia, where 10% of the population is H11A, and that's it. And that's as far as it would go, unless I knew something about my family history. 3 years ago, my grandmother died, and it was only then that we discovered she was Jewish. Up till then, we'd assumed she wasn't. Now, that's my mother's mother, so by definition, I'm Jewish too. And it really came as quite a surprise to us. Now, if you put the two pieces together, it could be that they were a family of Slovakian Jews who moved to the United Kingdom, perhaps in the 19th century, and who stayed there. And whatever their reasons for leaving, whether it was a pogrom, whether it was for economic reasons or because of general climate, well, they moved and they survived. So putting the two pieces together, I've also got a very interesting story. Now, the international speech is supposed to be about being inspiring, and I am so inspired by this, because there are two sides to my personality. There's the very British Radio 4 side to me, and there's the very international side to me as well. And I found that's not just about my mother and my father, but about the genes that are in me. And yeah, it was a bit expensive, but the price is coming down. And I want to inspire all of you in time to do this research, because I tell you, you'll find out more about yourself than you can by doing anything else. So my strong advice to you all is this: get to know your genes, and then you can give the ultimate icebreaker.